about Albo. Today he was at the National Press Club, as my dear friend Chris Keddy said. It's a home game for a Labor leader, lefty journos, sitting back trying to make the most out of a speech. The problem is the speech that they got today from Albo was pretty piss weak. He was in a position to outline a true vision for the country. Instead, it was essentially a bunch of vague statements of general complaints and whinging with no real specific answers. But he did give us a little bit of an insight into where he plans to scare people between now and the election. Medi-scare.
Labor has always fought for Medicare, and only Labor will protect Medicare.
But interestingly, what is the actual recent Labor Party history when it comes to people who are sick? Sure, Medicare's always fine, but when Rudd-Gillard-Rudd were in power, they didn't list for 3 years any drugs on the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. These are the drugs that would otherwise cost thousands of dollars that end up costing dozens of dollars and end up making people's lives better. That's the reality when Albo was sitting around the cabinet table, that there was no money to take care of people who were acutely ill with very specific conditions. Please continue.
Stripping our TAFE and training sector of investment over the last decade has led to crippling skills gaps and worker shortages.
Last time I checked, TAFE is run by state governments. Future potential Prime Minister, you might want to brush up on that. You see, there's a TAFE in New South Wales, a TAFE in Queensland, a TAFE in Victoria. There's not a national one. And then there was a promise about an NBN that would be better for all Australians. The only problem is that the actual detail of his promise is that only 1.5 million homes would end up getting direct fibre access to the NBN. Therefore, they would get the original plan that was put up by Kevin Rudd all those years ago. The Labor Party has actually walked away from its policy that it took to the 2013, 16 and 19 elections of having the original blue cable go to every single house in the country. But, you know, nothing to see here. And then there was, well, just like when it comes to climate policy, it's Bill Shorten's policy, but we'll just knock 2% off 45% and nobody will notice. Well, there's this policy that went so well for Julia Gillard.
The need for a high-quality NBN, because this isn't an optional extra.
Well, as I say about the NBN. Now, hopefully here, a conversation about education funding.
Every Australian school stands to benefit from this investment, and the schools themselves will decide how to use the extra money to best help their students. The other element of our plan is a schools upgrade fund, which will provide much needed support for improving ventilation in schools and creating outdoor learning areas.
Oh, new classrooms and ventilation. What was that called when it was Gillard's money? Building Education Revolution. Remember when she was the Education Minister, Rudd was the Prime Minister, and Albo was sitting around going, great idea, DJ Albo out. That's the new version that he wants to bring back in 2022. Of course, there's the climate stuff that we talked about in detail last night. Please check out that and share that around on social media at skynews.com.au. It's up on the Facebook page. But again, he's pretending that hundreds of thousands of jobs will fall from the sky when we shut down coal-fired power stations.
Our Powering Australia plan will reduce Australia's emissions by 43% by 2030, putting us on track for net zero by 2050. It's a plan with economic growth at its heart. Over 600,000 jobs created.
But as I told you last night, their own modelling shows that at least half of this magical 600,000 jobs comes from lower power prices. Lower power prices, that by the way, will just be $275, in 3 years' time. You wouldn't be able to pay a tradie to come around for half a day for that money, let alone actually hiring someone for 52 weeks a year. And the actual modelling shows that just 64,000 people would be hired directly in the creation of the new energy sector. Magical numbers, but who cares? He's got all the hit lines right. He's got all the things that he's ready to say about the Prime Minister. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to renewable energy, you should know the decision made out of Victoria today that it is your responsibility to clear the land for the wind turbines to be put on your land. Because, you know, But we did get a little example about exactly how hard Anthony Albanese is going to hit and where he's going to hit between now and the election. He simply thinks that it is the flushing of the Morrison government. There is nothing about what happens the day after the government changes that anyone should care about.
He doesn't hold a hose and he doesn't give a rat's.
And largely because the media will not point out the flaws in the climate policy like we did last night. It's only $275 in 3 years off your power bill. It's 64,000 jobs, not 600,000 jobs. And 43% emissions reduction is just 2% different than what was rejected by the people a couple of years ago. No, the media, of course, is thoroughly invested in Morrison getting the pasting that he should have got last time. Why? Because, of course, he displaced the rightful leader of the Liberal Party, Labor's very own, or the man who wanted to join the Labor Party, Malcolm Turnbull. You see, that's what they want. They want lefty versus lefty. They don't want mainstream versus lefty. They hate programs like this one and networks like ours, not because we spew misinformation and hate, but because we are effective at being able to push back. Because we call BS on the detail that we don't make up, that they give us. I've shown you that the true cost of transition when it comes to the energy plans that are coming forward out of Anthony Albanese is $1 trillion. The CSIRO told us that in a report. David Spears told Anthony Albanese that directly when he was on Channel 2 a couple of years ago. He knows that's the number, but because you just want to make it seem like you're going to do something, do the Jedi mind trick, this is not the amount of money that we need. His promise is $20 billion over 10 years for the rewiring of the nation. But the media, well, they trail, of course, in narratives. They have decided which way you're going to vote at the next election. They believe that Conservatives are so pissed off that they're going to vote for anyone but the Liberal Party, and long-term Liberal voters are going to go and vote for the fake independents who, of course, are only running in Liberal seats. Isn't that amazing? You want to change democracy, but you only want to change one political party's capacity to participate in that democracy? Clive Palmer's a terrible, evil billionaire because he has all of those TV ads. But Simon Holmes à Court is an awesome billionaire because he's helping Climate 200 find all of these grassroots candidates to only run against the Liberal Party. Sadly, it's effective because if all of the media all of the time push a narrative, then the numbers start to change. As you know, the media would have you believe that everything awesome was done by the states and everything awful happened as a result of the federal government, despite the fact that, as the latest jobs numbers showed us, more people have a job now than before the pandemic. While 3,000 people dying is a tragedy, compare it to places like Sweden, who've got half of our population, but 17,000 people who died. This is the Prime Minister and a government who put JobKeeper in place to make sure that you didn't go on the unemployment queue. When the issues were about how long people had to sit in a queue for a PCR test, they moved the system to rat tests. And sure, while there weren't enough for a couple of weeks, in a couple of weeks, we've made so many panic orders, we'll be swimming in the damn things. It'll almost be a rat plague. But again, it doesn't matter because the media have decided how you should vote at this upcoming election. Who knows whether they're right or not? But the polls, which, yes, often lean Labor and are too much in favour of the Labor Party and often can be wrong, and silent voters and all the rest of it. But the number I've talked about consistently for 3 years is preferred Prime Minister. When you can see the red line of Anthony Albanese being absolutely a country mile behind Scott Morrison, I said there was no chance of him becoming Prime Minister. The problem is now he's well and truly beating Don't Know and he's on his way to becoming level with the Prime Minister, which means there's a chance it could happen. Which means we have a fork in the road, Australia. Which means I am going to talk relentlessly about what that fork in the road is. Because we have made this mistake before. Remember in 2007, when even people like me thought it was time for a change. What we got, of course, was Rudd. What we're going to get with Albo is worse. And also, I think he's going to be a little bit like Joe Biden. Sure, he's not going to fall up the stairs, but he's going to pretend to be middle-of-the-road man before the election. And then with a cabinet with people like Christina Keneally in it, he goes hard left straight away. He says Australia Day is 100% safe under his leadership. But his Minister for Indigenous Affairs says we should move Australia Day. Who do you think is really going to win that fight in the long run? He says we should have a republic, but of course the republic model is one of 11 different candidates who end up being put up for the Australian people to vote on. That's the preferred model of the Australian Republican movement. These are things that you can't unwind, you can't change, but you can delay their revolution for another 3 years. And it really pisses them off. So the power, as always, is in your hand.